Hey y'all, have y'all ever heard of the term self-silencing? It's pretty self-explanatory, but I want to dig into it a little bit. It's a concept that refers to the tendency to not speak up, perhaps when you should, or when you have something that you're feeling, thinking, and you'd like to be acknowledged, but you have a fear that if you speak up, you're going to experience consequences. It often happens when a person is punished in some way for speaking up with some level of consistency. You know, there are four ways to communicate. You can be aggressive, you can be passive, you can combine the two and become passive aggressive, or you can be assertive. And a lot of times we haven't been taught and we haven't received the right models of assertiveness and assertive communication. And so we often will end up falling into one of the other three categories, all of which are actually pretty dysfunctional. Being aggressive is usually because someone is afraid that if they don't, they're going to be walked all over. And that's the last thing they're willing to do. So they over communicate and over impose their own will on other people to make sure that they're never actually taken advantage of or mistreated. Passive people have the fear that they're going to rock the boat. They don't really like the idea of confrontation and conflict. And so they figure that the way that they can avoid it is by just not speaking up and letting other people sort of take the lead and have their way, even though they themselves have different needs and different interests and different wants and desires and feelings. They don't really feel led to speak them or voice them because they don't want to, again, disturb the peace. And then passive aggressive people, these are people who are a little of both. They don't really want to rock the boat, but they also don't want to be walked all over. And so they find underhanded, indirect ways to still get what they want or punish people for taking over, right? These are the most difficult to correct because a lot of times passive aggressive people won't even admit to themselves that that's what they're doing. These are the people who you walk in the kitchen, they're slamming cabinets closed and all of these things. And you're like, is something wrong? No, I'm fine. Everything about their behavior and their actions and their attitude is screaming, I'm not okay. But they're too passive to actually confront what's going on. Assertiveness is actually the only way to communicate that's healthy. But the problem is that sometimes we get punished even for being assertive. People don't like assertive people because it makes them feel uncomfortable. It makes them feel like they have to share the space. They have to share the right to have what they want go forward. And so assertive people are intimidating sometimes because they come across as confident and self-assured, and they're not stepping on toes and stepping on boundaries. And often they're pretty reasonable. They're pretty reasonable. If you're truly an assertive person, you are typically going to be pretty reasonable because assertive people consider all of the perspectives and then know how to voice their own rationally and reasonably. Now, here's where self-silencing comes in. If you're like your average good Christian wife who wants to, be that meek and gentle and quiet spirit, then the moment you go to speak up or voice your opinion or assert yourself and you get punished by being called a nag because maybe you did it what your spouse considers too assertively or more often than they really were ready to hear it, that can be a consequence, a punishment. That can make you second guess whether or not you should have spoken up in the first place. And then you go into a mode of, okay, so I just won't say anything. I'll just pray about it. I'll just wait. And unfortunately, that often leads to the family being suffering in ways that they didn't have to because prudence walked out the door and instead emotions took over. Even male emotions can be toxic and dysfunctional. A lot of times we hear about women having extremely, dysfunctional emotions and being neurotic and out of control, but men's emotions often show up in ego. Instead of them being able to listen and hear and be challenged and respect taking pause and reconsidering. Sometimes ego gets in the way and they are hiding behind, I'm the man and I'm supposed to take the lead. A true leader is a wise person who knows when to listen, who knows when to use the counsel of other wise people. Even when we think about our nation, the president doesn't sit in a seat as authority alone. There's a cabinet of advisors who give him information that he needs to use to consider. There's also a balance of government, so other branches that keep things in balance and make sure that no one individual ever becomes a tyrant and their will is the only one to be considered. There's safety in numbers. And so when God put two people together in a marriage, there's safety in considering both perspectives. There are things that you can see that your husband can't see. There are problems you can anticipate that your husband can't. And these occasions require you to be willing to speak up. Now, if you're afraid of rocking the boat, you have to deal with that fear. Sometimes speaking up is going to come with rejection. It's going to come with not being well received. And unfortunately, I'll be honest, that might be a sign of immaturity in your husband. You know, Paul in the Bible, the Apostle Paul said, when I was a child, I thought as a child. I spoke as a child. I reasoned as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. And I want to actually take a moment to consider, what does that mean as it relates to leaning into and relying upon the wisdom of your wife? What it means is you're willing to listen and put aside your ego, your right to be the head and the one in charge making all the decisions. You see, it takes a good leader to consider all of the perspectives. There's wisdom and safety in considering all of the perspectives. So back to you, ladies, here's the deal. No more self-silencing. It will make you physically sick to not be able to speak up when you need to. It'll also cause you to suffer consequences you didn't have to. I'm not saying become cantankerous, become a nag, become unpleasant to be around, but you have to be able to stay calm and in love, speak your truth. That's how you overcome self-silencing, and that's how you offer the benefit of a prudent wife to your husband and to your family. God bless you.